All right, my renowned fam, happy new year. I hope you guys had a great holiday, and I hope you guys are cocked, locked, ready to rock and crush 2000 or 2024. I don't know what I'm talking about, 2000s. That's way in the past. But today I am joined by a very special guest all the way from the Philippines, Leanne Lacaba.
Hey,
Yeah?
Stephen. Yep.
What's
Yep.
going on,
Right.
Leanne? How
Happy
you
New Year to
doing?
everyone else.
Yeah,
I've
happy
been
new
doing.
year. So, I want to, I just kind of want to dive right in because I got a lot of questions. Um, so one of the things, and we were talking before we started recording, I've never actually been to the Philippines, but I've worked with quite a few Filipinos,
Mhm.
and obviously Leanne is Filipina. That's why we're talking about this. Anyway, so that work ethic, where does that come from? Because I feel like every Filipino I've worked with, whether it's been in my business or in the military, they've always had a very, very strong work ethic, which in your introduction to me, you exhibit as well. So where is that part of the culture in the Philippines? How does that come about?
I think parts of it, because I've definitely, like, as someone who has now, like, the last couple of years been employing Filipinos and seeing like the differences between like hiring other nationalities. I think one, it comes from the fact that we were conquered three times. Like Spaniards for 300 years, Americans for 30 years, Japanese for 3 years. I think it comes from that of like, I think it's hardwired in our genes to be in survival mode, and to like keep showing up even we're because we were gonna get whipped if we didn't. I think that's one part of it. It's just like the history of it, because like I love
Mhm.
going when I travel all over the Philippines. I love going to our museums, and I can see like the differences between, oh, this city experienced it this bad, or like for the city that I'm originally from, my hometown. That's where General MacArthur actually landed for the World War II to like turn the tide for the Philippines. So like each city, each island, because we have 7,000 islands, have a different part of history for them of like what happened. And you'll see that also that the differences in also their work culture there too. And I think the other side of it is, for here in the Philippines, it's always family first. Like that's our biggest thing about our values. So we don't have old people's homes to here. Daycare is very, very rarely like actually done. Everyone tries to like take care of themselves, take care of their own. So I think that's one part of it, is like our drive to take care of everyone else. So we know we have to show up. So it's kind of been both sides of the past and kind of the taking care of our future, that drives that ethic.
That's incredible. I love that. And family first, that is especially in the Asian culture, for the most
Mhm.
part, that is a very Asian culture driven thing,
Yep.
of family first, which I wish the US, the Western cultures would adopt that as well. That's an interesting take though, and I think that's a very, very important, because you're right. Whenever you do have your parents, elderly parents relying on you, your grandparents relying on
Yep.
you, your sister's kids relying on you, you got to
Hmm.
show up in a different way, because it's not just me, myself, and I anymore. It's an entire family unit that you didn't even select. You just got here, take care of
You did
this.
something to it. So yeah.
And so that started at a very early age for you. I think in the introduction, it was I think you said 15 that you started
Mhm.
your first uh company per se.
Kind of. I really stumbled into it because I'm very, very much an early adopter. Like I've owned that. Like I got the very first iPod. I got the and it was right before also the iPhone came out, which I found really funny for myself. Of like, oh darn it, I should have waited like one more month for the first iPhone to come out. And I was like 14 at that time. When I was 15 years old, I was just like stumbling through blogging, which is such a new format at that point, especially in the Philippines. No one heard about blogging before. And I started basically just offering writing services for people because they would contact me like, hey, I like the way you write. Can you write for me? I'm like, sure, let's figure it out. PayPal wasn't even a thing in the Philippines, so I'd ask like family members from the US to send money to me. So it was a whole hullabaloo at that point in 2011. But it kind of just like the curiosity and the drive got me first.
And it just kind of excelled from there. What was your first actual legit company? How old were you whenever that started?
It's hard to say because I've had so many like mini businesses throughout. Like I did at one point I did same day edit services. Like I would go to events and take shots of videos and then I will like do the editing while everyone's having fun. I'll do like the hard edit and then by the end of the event, like showing that. I had at one point I was selling a lot of other people's used books. Like I'll collect their used books and I'll sell it online. I'll give them a cut of it. So and that was like all when I was like 17, 18. So officially, I would say for 2XU, because that's like the one that's incorporated and actually like
Hmm.
doing its dues. I was 23. But then the rest I'd had like mini small things that I kept doing. At one point, I was doing book subscription boxes where every single month, like people would pay me to curate like a really nice box for them that has like a book in the center and I'll have like knickknacks and bookmarks and all of that. I had a lot of them just because like again, curiosity and drive got me there.
Well, what was your biggest, obviously 2XU, but of your little side businesses while you were learning, what was your biggest success?
That one, the book subscription
The
for sure.
book?
Because 20 to 25 orders. It was mostly me. My room was always a mess. Um it was always like glitter somewhere, paint somewhere, just because I was kind of doing just that all on my own. So I would say that's still the biggest one, just because like I got to the point where like, oh, I'm getting like consistent 20 to 25 orders. So that was pretty cool.
How much were you charging per box?
I think it was like $20 each box, and it would like again, it like already had the book. The highest that I charged was about $40 because it was a Harry Potter themed box. So it had like a lot of things in it, from like the necktie, the bookmarks. Hand painted the actual box. I even have it here somewhere in my room still because I saved one of them. So that was a lot of effort, but that was the range basically of the boxes.
That's awesome. What was your biggest failure?
Ah, which one? I think for me, like I did so well with a lot of the small businesses because it was me. And like for me, like the biggest learning curve was managing people. And it's
Mm,
still, I'm still learning the balance between managing people and leading people. Because at sadly twice it happened to me where the both for 2XU and the other company that I used to run, the publishing company, where I didn't hire managers fast enough, or I wasn't able to listen to people well enough to know what they needed. That they sadly started leaving the company, or I would lose like really A players. So that's kind of always been the has not always has been the theme. And then since then, I've been really like honing in on what that is, of making sure that I'm making space for it. But that's one where I know for a lot of people they also go through. It's just like people is the biggest thing where we can't really fully control, and there's always things outside of themselves even that move them. So I would say it's that one.
no, I totally understand. And learning first, first of all, I will say that you're ahead of the curve because you understand that there is a difference between leading and managing,
Yeah.
completely two separate things. I hate it when people combine them. It really drives me nuts. But so yeah, good job on recognizing that. And then as you further develop your leadership skill, just my advice to you will always keep your purpose in line with your goals. As
Yeah.
long as your purpose are in line with your goals, that's going to help you keep your integrity intact. As long as you lead with integrity, everything else is covered. Ignore all these idiots out there. And I don't care if y'all want to send me hate mail because they're just selling crap. The 8 pillars of this or the 262 ideas that will change your life. All of that is nonsense. You need one, integrity, lead with integrity. It covers everything else. So
Yeah.
just always lead with integrity. So good job. I applaud that. And you're 26 now, correct? 25,
27.
27. Okay, my
Yeah.
bad. I can't do math, so forgive me. So I mean, yeah, and it's funny because an interesting statistic I just learned is the average person does not start receiving leadership training until they're 42 years old. So,
Interesting.
right? So, I mean,
Mhm.
you're way ahead of the bell curve on that one. So anyway, no, that's awesome. How has your family taken your entrepreneurial journey? Have they been fully supportive? Have they been scared? They want you to go to college, get a job.
So funny. It's always funny whenever I'll tell you the full circle, but I always find it funny when people ask me that. So I started working online when I was 15. And when I was 18, we were just talking about it right before. I went through a super typhoon that barreled into our city. That basically brought in a not an actual tsunami, but tsunami like waters into our actual home. Which for me, I'm the eldest of four. I am the in charge of the house when both parents are gone, and both parents were gone. Just the timing of it during that typhoon, and the waters were rising up to my neck, and I was like, oh crap, I'm gonna drown. I might just be another statistic after this of like so and so many people died during this typhoon. um and I had this moment where instead of my life going backwards, I went forward of like, oh, this trajectory where I was going to call a really good college at that time, like one of the top universities in the Philippines. I had this trajectory of my mom and I wanted me to go to law school and then apply for jobs overseas. We had this whole plan. And I remember I still hate it. My gut always like, I hate that. I don't want that. That's not the path for me. So I like made a promise to myself of like, hey, if I survive this, I'm going to change my life and actually pursue the things that I want to do, not just because everyone tells me that I'm going to do this. So I finished basically my third year of college, and I moved to the city where I'm at now. I was 18 years old, terrified, PTSD, depression, anxiety, all the D's. I had it. And
All the D's.
all the deeds, all the letters basically. And I started that life of like, okay, I'm gonna figure out what I actually want to do. So that's also around that time where I had a lot of the side businesses. I was working for this publishing company, and at one point things were a startup. They're like, hey, we're gonna start up the offshoot of the publishing company. Who wants to run the publishing company? I'm a huge bookworm. So I raised my hand. I'm like, I would love training on how to run a company. And then a year and a half later became CEO of that, ran that for 3 years before 2XU. But then for my parents, especially my mom, and I love her to death, was super against it. Like there were months where she wouldn't talk to me. At one point, she blocked me on Facebook just to get me to like go back to school. And we had
Harsh.
fights and fights. But then my mom, because of who she was, and I'm saying was because sadly she passed 2 years ago,
I'm sorry.
would come here to visit me. She would be lovey, lovey. She like I missed you, like I want you to go home, and like she would take me out on these restaurants, and but then whenever I went home, we were like fighting. I'm like, why not just stay here? Why have to go back to the city? Blah 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 blah. And then it was this moment a few years ago when I started to exceed, when I started gaining like all the accolades, all the cool stuff basically that comes with starting a business, that she was like, okay, I see where you're going there. I see what you're doing. I understand it a little bit now. And right after she sadly got diagnosed with cancer, we had this moment, and I will always have this in my heart forever, never, never. It's like 6 a.m. It was just the day before we found out the diagnosis, and she said, Leanne, I'm proud of you. You fought against me, your mother dragon, and that's the best way to describe my mother. And you showed up. And you found this path that I never could have in a million years saw coming. And that's like, even as my mom passed, that's something that I'll always have. And for my dad, like he was very much I'm a daddy's girl. So for him, he didn't understand it, but he tried to understand it. He tried to be a little bit of the in between between myself and my mom for a little bit there. But now he like sees it. He asks for my advice because we now run a family cafe in my mom's name. He's like, hey, how should we do this? How should we take care of employees here? So it's been a full circle moment of the last like 10 years since I left home, basically.
That's awesome. That's a very beautiful story. I'm sorry for the loss of your mom, of course. But so I want to come back a little bit to where you were talking about PTSD, and I'm going to assume, and you don't have to actually talk about that, but I'm going to assume it's from the tsunami and the typhoon. I could imagine that would being very traumatic. Um, I myself have dealt with PTSD uh, from being in the military all those years, and it's very hard to lead people when your mind can flip in a
Mhm.
matter of seconds. Have you learned any good tricks or tips that you can share with someone that might be struggling the same way of how to control those trips?
I think the first one is to recognize it because, like, for a while, for a good 6 to 8 months, I had no idea what was happening. Like, the panic attacks would just happen, even when if it's just, and the trigger for me was soft rain. Like, even a soft rain or a little bit of a wind, I would start having like shutdowns, like full
Mhm.
shutdowns. Um, and sometimes it might be like during a meeting, my brain would just off, and I would be like, don't know what I was, and then I would just need a moment. But then for a while, I never like accepted that that was the thing that was happening to me. So that's the first thing is like learning to accept, like, okay, this is what's going on. Because learning to verbalize it comes later on, but like for yourself, for your own like language and taking care of yourself, acknowledging is, I think, would be the really first one. Um, the second one was the turning point for me was I was going to therapy. And apparently my core for the PTSD wasn't really even like almost dying. It was the fear of my siblings dying because they were so young at that point. I was 18, my brother was 17, 16. My other two sisters were like barely 12 and 11. So there was that fear of like losing a lot of people that I loved to something that was just rain, that started off something as just rain. So when I learned that, when my amazing therapist got me to that point, my brain kind of like, ah, it's coming from love. The fear came from the love of my siblings because I love my siblings. I will fight anyone for my siblings. Um, and I actually have fought people for my siblings. Um, and it's discovering that of like what was beyond the fear helped me a lot on figuring out. So like journaling, doing the work, reading a lot of really good books about people who've gone through it helped a lot with me when that came out of therapy. There wasn't a lot of resistance because it was already working towards that.
Mhm.
And like for me now, it's very, I would sometimes like I said, yeah, just yesterday we had a little super typhoon go through just the top of the Philippines, so it didn't really affect us, but just a strong wind. Just like I started getting a little bit of palpitations, but I was like, no, this is out of love. So then I have now my language, and other people around me, they know it. Like they know if it's
Mhm.
a little bit, Leanne will be a little bit jumpy, but she's gonna be okay. um, so it was that, it's that recognition and then getting to the core of it, so then you can take care of yourself, so you know where that fear is coming from and you're able to like coach your way out of it.
That's great advice, and I agree completely. And I think for me, one of the most powerful things that you said is everyone that's close to you or works closely with you, they know,
Yeah.
right? And for me, that I was always ashamed of it, right? And so um when the fear of getting shot again, like anytime there would be a loud noise, I would instantly look for cover. Like someone's trying to shoot me, I gotta get to cover. And to this day I still jump if there's a sudden loud pop that I'm not aware is about to happen. And my friends, my colleagues, they all laugh. They think it's the funniest thing in the world. And at first it was very upsetting to me because I didn't want it to be that way. I didn't want to admit it. But once I finally did, it was like a burden got lifted off my chest completely. And now it's just, I'm able to laugh with them. And
Yeah.
it just relieves that tension, that fear, that stress that comes with it almost instantly because I mean, laughter is the best medicine, in my opinion, for anything. And especially, I know they're laughing out of not necessarily love, but they're not laughing out of being mean either.
Mm.
So I mean, it just it makes that atmosphere so much better. So 100% for me, the key was I had to just admit it and accept that this is what it is, and it's not anything to be ashamed of.
Very true. Very true. That's beautiful though. I like that you found that's that's I can just imagine like if he was probably so much more with yours, just the experience of just having it almost at any time. Someone could be just opening something up or dropping something and get that jumpiness. But
Hmm.
that's good that you kind of found a little bit of the lightness with it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was actually funny. The way everyone found out was we were all outside, and I live in the Midwest in the United States, and we just have freak random thunderstorms that pop up out of nowhere.
Mm.
And so we were just standing there outside, and all of a sudden there's just this big clap of lightning, and I was under a truck. Before anyone could realize what had happened, I was under a truck. It scared me to death. And so they thought that was just the funniest thing. And so, and that's ultimately what forced me to accept that it is what it is, and it's okay. It's okay to be, and then, the mental health aspect I've gotten since especially since I left the military, even when I was in the military, but very much more today, I'm very big into mental health.
Hmm.
Mental health is, I hate that it's ignored. I feel like it's just completely ignored, and at least in the Western societies. I don't know about the how it is in Philippines, but in the West or in the U.S., it's there is kind of a stigma that if you're not mentally sound, then you're weak. And
It's here it's not even that there's a stigma. Here it's mostly just ignored. Which is because like in at least for like it's been changing a little bit in the last couple of years, but here it used to be that if you went to therapy, that means your parents have failed. So then the parents would take it personally. Of like, oh, you're going to therapy, we failed you as a parent, blah blah blah. And for me, like I didn't tell my parents for years that I was going to therapy because I knew about that. Um, and it's still a little bit of a shameful thing sometimes when people admit it, but like at least for me, and this is my experience, like with surrounding myself with people in my generation, like the millennials, they've been more accepting of it. Just like, oh, like, and they would even like, oh, I was looking for a therapist. Like, I would love to get a recommendation from yours, and like, X, Y, and Z. Like, I want to be able to do this. But whenever I talked about it to adults, then it would be well, adults at that time. I'm now an adult myself. Um, it was very much like, oh, why are you doing that? Why not just like, why not turn to your family? Why not turn to which one I heard a lot? Why not turn back to God? Which for me, at that point in my life, I was a Catholic or my whole life. I still am to a certain point, but for me, like it just felt so distant. And whenever people would bring up religion, people would bring up like go back to your family and so you'll feel whole again because people thought that when we go to therapy, we weren't whole anymore. Um, that's kind of the still for to this day like I would hear stories but it's still kind of the stronger stigma of like if you're going to therapy you're missing something in your life.
right, yeah, it's the same. I feel like like you said, it's getting better. Our generations are definitely fixing uh,
Mm.
some of it, but at the same time, I feel like they're taking it too far. Because I do believe in you do need to be mentally tough. It's just, an athlete isn't shamed for pulling a hamstring. Your
Like,
brain is a muscle. If something is mentally wrong with you, you just pulled that muscle or broke a bone, and it just needs to be healed. So that's kind of the way I look at it. But so the reason I brought it up is I love remote work, and I know and people kind of get irritated with me. I'm not a COVID apologist or denier or anything like that. But there were a few decent things that came out of COVID. And one is the world realized we don't have to go work in a windowless factory all day long for beans when I can just kind of do my own thing at home, or this work can be done at home for the same company. And so, but the problem is we lose that social piece of our lives a lot, right? Because think about it. You don't have to leave your home for anything anymore. You want, you want to go out to eat? Fantastic. DoorDash it. You
Yep.
want groceries? Fantastic. Amazon it.
Mm-hmm.
You want to go to work? Fantastic. Go sit at your desk in your in-home office. You don't even have to leave to go to the movies. Like you don't have to leave to go on a date. You don't have to leave to do anything.
True. That's true. Mm-hmm.
So we're losing that social piece. For you, how do you ensure that you're staying healthy with that social connection, even though you don't necessarily, you can work at home, you can work at the office, it's your company, you can really do what you want. How do you ensure you're always keeping that healthy balance of I'm going to work remotely and interact with other humans?
Well, given that I've been doing this literally my whole career, other than there was like 3 months when I had to do an internship that I worked in an office, and that was it. Most of my life, I have been, I could say I've perfected a little bit of like how to set up your home office, just because like even as I've moved, even as I've gone different places, I know what's essential. Even when I'm traveling, I know what I'm bringing for myself. And the balance a little bit of not just being stuck, not just being like, oh, I'm just here for the next. That was kind of a little bit of the sad part during the pandemic was like we couldn't go anywhere. So then for me, I have gone through lengths of also learning how to be able to do the sometimes I do have to stay at home for the whole day because I have meetings from 8 o'clock to 8 p.m. just because of time zones for clients. And there are days like where I can just actually run around and be in a coffee shop for the whole day. So it's kind of parts of it is I have, and I used to have it on my desk, and I think I because I memorized it, I moved it. I have D&D dice, D4
Mhm.
dice where I've listed there the four things I like to do for fun. And whenever I so tired, so burnt out, whatever it is that I'm feeling, I just have those four to pick from. So then it's for me, it's fun. So it's one is like I'll just go ahead to coffee shop to read a book. Two was I would actually then go to a cafe that I've been wanting to go. So I have a Notion database basically of cafes I want to go. Um, three was um three was to call up someone random. I think like either one of my friends who lives in the same building as me or some of my friends who are like out in the city to see if I can meet up with them. And four was to take myself on a self date. And a self date for me was I would go on dinner, I would then have coffee afterwards, and then I would just be just by myself. Like I would buy myself a steak and people would be looking at me of like this 4'11" woman who just like in a fancy dress looking going to a fancy restaurant and that was four, so like sometimes it would drop to that, but it was because I had defaults that it was easy for me to not have to really think about it. I had something I was looking forward to, I had something that I knew I could set myself up for success on having that balance between just being kind of stuck on my own work desk versus being able to go out. So that's kind of how I've done it, and I've taught it to a lot of other people as well. Of like working from home can be very draining because you're kind of having the same space of where you sleep and where you work. And that affects a lot of people who've never done it before, who needs to go to an office, who needs to like be out of the house, especially with some people sadly who can't stay at home for like one reason or the other. Um, so like having a routine that you can follow of a fun way. Like I've made that D4 dice default for me just because it's fun. It's like looking forward, like, okay, when I finish all of these tasks, I will roll my D4 and I'll know what I'm going to do next. So it's finding the fun of what works for you because that won't work for everyone else, but it's experimenting and knowing that you can't pour from an empty cup. So you have to take care of yourself in whatever capacity that looks like. And what that looks like for me is like finding fun for myself.
No, I agree completely. And I think for me, the most important thing you said is systems. Like you got to develop your systems.
Mm-hmm.
And, you talked a little bit about, you've perfected the art of setting up your in-home office. That is so freaking important. People don't
Mm-hmm.
realize, like, I understand, like, if your only option is to put your desk in your bedroom, fine, do what you got to do. But at the end of the day, you should be looking for that separate space that is your workspace, your thinking space, your creative space, like whatever you need. And it needs to be very functional and very um exactly what you need it to be. Your systems need to be honed in to where it's not a mess. I'm very picky. My office is always very clean. Um, I don't want clutter because I feel like if my desk is cluttered, then my mind is cluttered.
Mm-hmm.
I know other people don't work that way. This is just me. But I have my whiteboard, I have my bookshelf right there. Like everything is organized. Like my systems are very, very important. And my routine is very, very important. So totally like those two things. And the man, every successful person I've ever talked to, and when I say successful, I understand success has a different definition based on every single person. But like I'm talking entrepreneurial success, like they have successful businesses. Every single person that I talk to, the one thing they all have in common is they all have a very strict routine, especially a
Mm-hmm.
very strict morning routine. Do you
Yep.
have a pretty strict morning routine?
Well, I did it right before this call. And it's because like we like especially when you work from home and I you reminded me of that piece that I teach people is like when we go to an office, there's the routine of like, okay, put on, I take a bath or whatever you're doing in the morning. You put on your uniform or clothes or whatever, and then you go to an office. There's that separation. But when you work from home, there's not that separation of like leaving. You could be going to the other room for your office, or you could be in the same desk basically that's still in your room. So having a routine helps frame your mind of like, oh, I'm now in work mode. I'm now put on this persona of myself, still part of me, but this is now in the front and center. So for me, it's meditating, reading, journaling. I haven't been so good at the journaling part lately, but then it's just because I've been traveling also a lot. And then before anything else in my day, I would pick, okay, what would be one thing, this is coming from the book Make Time. What would be the highlight of my day? What would be something that if I got this done, I know the rest of my day was worth it. And so I'll set that intention. So then when I sit down, I'm on it. I would I would wear before that I would like put on my makeup still. I would wear as if I'm going out. And I've had so many outfit of the days pictures and people ask me, where did you go that day? You look so pretty. I'm like, my desk. But for me, like it helped with that setting of like, oh no, I'm now in work mode versus like on Saturdays, on Sundays, I'll just be in my pajama the whole day. I might be sitting on my desk, but it's just to set up Netflix or something. But it's that for me, it helps like framing, okay, I'm putting on my makeup, doing this. I'm thinking about like, okay, what's my highlight for the day, putting on clothes, putting on my pearls. So then I feel that shift of like, okay, I'm becoming this Leanne now. It helps that routine, just that automatic, no thinking anyway. Sometimes I know what I'm doing and going through my day.
I'm the exact same way. I cannot work in just shorts and a t-shirt. Like I have to be dressed like I'm working.
Yep.
Um, unless it's the weekend. Weekends, I make exceptions for weekends because I work a lot of weekends. But it's like, you know what? It's Saturday, it's Sunday. I'm gonna wear whatever I want. Um, but
Mm,
during the week, yeah, totally, I have to do that. And I think, like you said, it frames the mindset, but it also, I feel like it helps me with the purpose. It helps align my purpose with what I'm doing.
yeah.
Um, and it just makes you feel good.
Yeah.
At least me. Like
It
it's
makes
like,
me feel
okay,
good.
yeah, it's like, okay, I look presentable. Now I can go crush it. As to
Hmm.
where if you're just wearing your PJs and your hair's a
Yeah.
mess and you haven't shaven, or for me, I haven't shaven, then it's like, okay, who are you going to go talk to? And so, yeah, totally agree with that. So tell me about 2XU. What is 2XU about?
So 2XU, I love that you've been talking about like purpose and alignment. 2XU came from me realizing that my purpose in life is to help a million Filipinos be able to work from home, work remotely. And that came from, like I said, in my story of the super typhoon. My dad worked overseas my whole life, up to the pandemic. He was working in Europe. He would come home once or twice a year, so I would barely see my dad. And like I said, I'm a daddy's girl, so like I would miss him like so much. And
Yeah, that was hard.
he missed a lot of
Mm.
my own childhood, of me teenager, and that's just me, like more so for my siblings who were younger even. um and for my mom, she worked at an office, so she would be flying to different places for training and other things that needed of her. So for me, I envisioned a world where people had a choice to want to go to an office or to be able to work from home, because work from home is definitely not for everyone. um so having that in mind, I was like, okay, how do I do that? How the heck? It was this brilliant moment. And I remember it was like March of 2019, when I had that epiphany of like, okay, that's my vision. 2018. And I was like, okay, how do I do it? Full I need to help Filipinos get employed first. And how do I do that? Okay, how I have to teach foreigners, which you guys are foreigners to me, how they're online. So it was timing that when I went to this to my boss at that time, who's now my co-founder, Tom. And when I went to him, he's a tall white guy, and I'm like, hey, tall white guy, how can I get people to hire Filipinos? And like, oh, we can do a course, we can do this. So we started 2XU first as a course on how to hire virtual assistants. We did that for a year. Um, and then around the time we were doing a lot of speaking gigs, we were speaking in Malaysia, Singapore, we were teaching this to a lot of people. We got to a point where one of the students basically said, I love what you teach. Can you just do this for me? Like, I don't want to do this by myself. I've tried this before, blah, 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 blah. And so that's kind of how 2XU as a service started out, was you would then be the recruitment team, the management team for people who wanted to hire virtual assistants for their own business. So that's kind of where a lot of it grew into. And now, almost 4 years later, 2XU has become this operations systems specialist, basically, because we've built a lot of the what we've learned basically from different clients of how the EA usually, or the VA usually, evolves in the businesses. They start ending up like running the actual business as operations, or they run like a specific part of the division of the company. So we've kind of taken about all of the things that we've learned. I mean, now, because I'm also very much a systems nerd, we've taken that and now have turned 2XU into, you're not just getting an executive assistant, you're getting your own business operating systems, and we'll work with you and the system to be able to build that. And then now with the rise of AI, it's now become like we're an AI empowered virtual assistant agency, just because all of our EAs are trained how to use ChatGPT. We're always talking about like, oh, look at this tool, try this one. This might be good for your client. So we're always evolving, but it comes still always goes back to that vision of mine of like helping a lot of Filipinos not have to go overseas to be able to have a good job for family, or having to travel for training, because everything is can be available online anyway.
So this question might seem a little taboo. I don't mean it to, but some of the pushback I've heard on hiring VAs from the Philippines is, for us, the perk is it's not it's inexpensive. And but a lot of people I talk to, they feel, I guess, guilty, um, because that same person is, you're paying them $10 an hour. In the US, you would be paying them $30 an hour.
Hmm.
So there's like that huge disconnect. And I mean, how do you view that? Do you guys even think of that? Is that
It's definitely been more of a rising conversation in like the freelance world of like a lot of it is like, for example, for 2XU, we are very much on a competitive rate just because it's a little bit of an arbitrage where here, like the example that we always like using is like here, getting your tooth fixed is like 20 bucks. Getting a tooth pulled, getting a cleaning, getting most of your dental stuff, it's about that range. It's
$20?
just yep. It's
Oh
just a different
man.
um a lot of people fly here to get their teeth done. That's I
No
know that.
kidding.
And it's like the like one of the best like dental you would also get it here. But it's just a different minimum of living. That's kind of the biggest one. Like here, our minimum wage is actually $1. For some private for some of the not the major cities. The major cities, I think it's like $2, $3. But for most of the rural areas, it's about that. And that's just because again we can live comfortably ish depending on how big your family is. You can already be doing really well with that. But then of course like there's also the argument of like depending on their expertise, what value are they bringing into your company, how much are they able to like for me, like I always when I'm pitching basically to XU, like if you think about it, like um they're going to take away a lot of the stress from you, not just like the tasks, but also the stress of you doing this every single day of something you hate doing, and then you find an assistant who loves doing that. There's also the alleviate of like what else can they bring into your company. You're bringing into someone else who's totally different culture, totally different point of view. They might be able to bring something that you've probably haven't seen before. So on the guilt of on the topic of guilt with the pay, it's also thinking of what's fair, of what can be like for us at 2XU, we charge so much, and because when you hire someone, one person, you're actually technically hiring three, just like the main assistant and then two other people who support them. Um, so it's definitely a balance of what's fair, of what can you still give them as other value other than just pay, when you're taking care of your Filipino employees, I guess.
Yeah. That's kind of the way I look at it. And I've lived in many different parts of the world. For me, the one of my favorite places to live, but also one of the saddest places to live, was when I lived in Poland. And
Mm-hmm.
it was kind of the same thing. I was a government paid employee and living in Poland, so I was getting paid by the U.S.
Mm-hmm.
My standard pay, which is like I was getting paid in a month what some Poles were getting paid in a year.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
And
So that's
so,
yeah.
yeah, huge. The way I explain it, like I would go take out 200 zloty a week or every 2 weeks because in the military you get paid on the 1st and the 15th. So on the 1st and the 15th, I would go to the ATM and I'd take out 200 zloty. That was like $27.30.
Mm-hmm.
And I would live off of that for 2 weeks. And that is buying food, going out, going to bars, traveling, like everything I needed was covered with that with $27.
Wow.
And so,
Mm-hmm.
right. But so it made, I was really sad because we don't get in the US, we don't experience that. Our standard of living is so ridiculous.
Yep.
When you see the other half, you're like, oh my gosh. And so then I think people, you know, $10 an hour in Poland, that is great money. Like they are living very well off of that. So I wouldn't feel guilty about paying that because I know I'm providing them a very good standard of living. And anyway, I was just curious because I've never actually got to ask somebody that question before. So thank you for indulging my curiosity.
It's basically that. It's literally that. It's just like our living here is cheaper than most places. Um, but then again, going back to like pay them what's fair. Don't just pay them little just because they can live off of just that much every single
Right.
month.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. So I want to talk a little bit about, we already covered a little bit about it, but leadership, but when it comes to a remote team, because that
Mhm.
is a completely different dynamic. And I've been writing about it almost every week for probably the past year, because that is just kicking people's butts.
Mhm.
How do you have any unique approach to uh, leadership from a remote perspective versus an in-person perspective?
So for the in-person perspective, like I said, I don't have a lot of experience there. The closest was for a time in the publishing company, we would have people come in on Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and if the rest of the time they were working from home. And even then, it was like they were only showing up for like at like 11 o'clock to 4 p.m. It was just for us to sync, like, hey, where the book's at, where the author's at, so on and so forth. Um, I think for me, just because I've been kind of bred to lead remotely, um, there's this book, and I always recommend it to even clients, and we buy this book for clients. It's called The 1 Minute Manager. That we've learned is really key when you're learning how to lead people online, because it teaches like how to give 1 minute praises, 1 minute redirects, and then 1 minute goal setting. And when you're not in the same office, when you're not in the same space, having a shared language for like, okay, where are you at on this, and not having to fully explain it, like, oh, okay, this is the update that you wanted, this is the things that this is going on. And for me, like I established a system where we have, for me and my system, we have daily syncs. For the rest of the team, we have weekly syncs. And then once a month we do a retrospective, and that has helped a lot with the communications of making sure everyone is in line with where things are at. um and I guess on the other side of it is like, it's also what you said earlier of the importance of building relationships even when you're working from home, of creating that social aspect of it. So um we find little bits of fun of being able to do it. Like we have same, I just realized it's the same thing that I'm doing in a company. Like once a week we'll have like who kicked butt in the last week, and we have a D4. So it's, I'm now realizing the pattern of what I've been doing. That means like random votes. So like one is you get a day off, two is you get a bonus sent to your wallet where you can buy coffee from it, three is you get a book that you want, and four is you get a care package. So it has still that feeling that, oh, I'm being taken care of. Oh, I'm not just someone who's just on their roster. I'm someone who they see. That has helped on the leadership side, because working from home enough is lonely if you don't add in the aspects of people laughing, of people making jokes, of people feeling like, oh, when we send them their onboarding kit, it has like it has a mug, it has a hairbrush for the girls, they have keychain for the guys. There's that added like, oh, the company I'm working for is real. They're not just a screen that I'm looking at every single day. They're real. They've sent me this physical thing. So like doing those things for them helps kind of blur a little bit of like the feeling of like, oh, I'm here again on my desk every single day. Okay, let's see what's going on today. Having that social aspect helps.
Right. Totally. But what about the team building? Um, Not just leading, but whenever it, and I don't know if it's necessary in the VA and system managerial space like what you do, but for a lot of organizations, team building, team collaboration is very important. What advice would you give leaders that are new to leading in the space of the virtual world, who are, they do need that team collaboration?
I guess it's a little bit harder for me to give advice on that, just because our VAs work one-on-one with their clients. They're not like a team working together. We have what we call pods, which basically for every 6 clients, it's one person is managing their EAs. Um, One of our actual like values in 2XU is called Tribe of Superheroes. So the way that it's written out is like every single person in 2XU has superpower, whether that's in admin, marketing, sales, whatever that looks like for them. And as tempting as it is, especially in our culture, to just give, to keep giving, you have to keep in mind to ask for it. So that's kind of a default, is like they know that they can ask for help. They know that if they're working out how Active Campaign works as a software, they don't have to figure it out alone. They can tap another VA who might be working for a different client but has gone through the same thing. So I think we've kind of just embedded that into like how we do certain things. So then for people, they have that collaboration, even though again they're working on totally different probably industries from time to time. But they can tap the knowledge of other people. And I think I do lean on the Filipino family first kind of thing, get a feeling of like family and friends first. So then I help them kind of like lean to the like, oh, you're not doing this alone. You have this whole tribe behind you who can support you in any shape or form that you need to.
That's great advice, and I love that. And having the tribe to lean on is the one of the most important aspects of a team. You know, that for me, that's the whole reason I have a team, is that when I fall, there's someone to pick me up. So, Leanne, I thank you so much for joining me today and just sharing your story and your passion. It's inspirational, and I've loved listening to you. And I know the listeners are going to get a lot of value out of hearing your story and just how you've overcome all the hurdles that have been put in your way. Super inspirational. I love it. Real quick before we bounce, though, I would love for you to throw out your best pitch and let people know how they can find you and get in touch with you.
So best pitch is if you are looking to hire a virtual assistant, you don't know where to start. I actually have a whole YouTube channel with like, I think I'm close to like 200 videos on there of how to hire a virtual assistant in the first place. And the same thing for people who are wondering how to be a virtual assistant. It's the same YouTube channel. It's just my name, Lacaba. And the best way to reach me is probably LinkedIn, just because like my assistant looks at it, which means that she makes me look at it when people message me on there. So it's very helpful dynamic. So yeah.
Absolutely, and that's awesome. And of course, I'm going to have all of Leanne's links in the bio or the show notes. So just scroll down to the bottom and make sure you click on them, bounce over to her socials or YouTube, give her plenty of like and love. And once you're done doing that, go over to renownedleadership.com and make sure you give me plenty of love as well. I thank you so much for joining us. And before we go, Leanne, I ask every guest this final question. What is your advice for people to lead like champions?
A combination of intention and love. It could be the love for a group of people. It could be a love of a vision that you already have, but it has to be cut with the intention of it, of moving forward. Of this is how I want to show up for you. This is how I want to show up for the people that I'm leading and for the people that I want to work with. Because I think for that, and you said this word a lot earlier, of like leading with integrity, when you have that combination of intention and love, you're then able to show up for other people as well.
Absolutely. Love it. That is great advice. Thank you so much. So that's going to wrap it up, everybody. I appreciate you joining us this week. Again, Happy New Year. I hope you had a great holiday, and I hope you are ready to crush 2024. So yeah, that's going to wrap it up for this week. I will see you all next week. She is Leanne Lacaba. Did I get it right? Yes. Yep. Leanne Lacaba. Thank you. And I am your amazing host, Stephen Morris. Thank you so much for joining us. I will see you all next week. And until then, don't forget, lead like a champion. Goodbye, everybody.